Hello, this is the Road to an Effective Classroom Environment, and I am your host, LaShanta. And what a wonderful journey we have been on thus far. And I wanted to take the opportunity to thank everyone who has been supporting the podcast and sharing the information with your friends and with your colleagues. Thank you so much. We are not just in the United States, but we have listeners who are worldwide. So again, thank you for being a part of this journey. And please, if you have the opportunity, share with me some of your feedback or your support, or just say, hey, you're doing an awesome job. I welcome your feedback. So you can drop me a line at my email address, which is LaShanta, LASHAWNTE, 6 @gmail.com. So I look forward to hearing from you. So today we are going to talk about reflecting for growth. That is our topic, reflecting for growth. And just the word reflection itself, it sounds so refreshing and new and energetic and just vivacious, just the word reflection itself. So when we're talking about reflection, we're looking at how often do we look back on the work that we do? How often do we think back to the words that we have said to others, whether it's our colleagues or, as we're looking at the classroom situation, the words that we say to our students? So reflection is a part of that process of maintaining an effective classroom environment. That reflective piece is very important when it comes to maintaining an effective classroom environment. So you have to first understand and take a look at, how much time is appropriate when you're looking back on the work in order to grow, in order to improve, and in order to maintain. So what is a good time frame? To start off with, your reflections, your daily reflections on the lessons that you bring forth in your classroom should start off with about 15 minutes. And over time, your reflections may go beyond that, because reflections can go beyond just 15 minutes. You may reflect back on the same lesson a year from now, because we know as educators, we can recycle some of our lessons, because if we had awesome lessons, do you throw those out? No, you want to maintain. So that's a part of reflecting, is what do I maintain and continue? So looking back, 15 minutes is a really good time frame to start off with when you're doing daily reflections on the lessons that you bring forth to your students. And reflection is not about picking apart and finding fault. We're not talking about breaking everything down and saying I did this wrong or I did that wrong and just finding fault in what you've done. No, reflection involves looking at the totality of the work in order to move forward. I'm going to say that one more time. Reflection involves looking at the totality of the work in order to move forward. So you're looking at, what did I do right? What do I want to add to these lessons? So you're not necessarily looking at fault. You want to start off with your positives, just like you start off with positives when you're talking to your students about the work that they did for you. And then you start looking at, well, these are the areas that you want to improve on. So look at what should you do in order to, what do you want to do in order to maintain and continue some of the things that you did in your lessons? So right now, I know that you're probably thinking to yourself, I've said the same thing, but you're probably thinking right now, okay, I barely have time to plan. I can't even keep up with all the expectations and the requests that are coming to me on a daily basis. So when am I going to find time to reflect? I have said the same thing. In my education career, when I was in the classroom, and even now as an administrator, there were times in which I said those exact same things. When am I going to find time? Well, if you continue to look at time as the enemy, you'll never find time. And time may not always seem to be on your side, but you know what you have been dealt. You know that you have 90 minutes in a block or 75 minutes in a period. You have 180 days to reach your students and to teach them. So time is already set. You've just got to make a way in order to add into that allotted time a little bit of time for you to reflect. And it can be done. You can do it. But don't look at time as being the enemy when you are thinking about reflecting. Purposeful planning is essential in education. We plan and plan, but when you do purposeful planning, then you can find the time to reflect. Creative cognition at convenient intervals is doable. And we're going to talk about some of those creative cognition intervals. So, when should you reflect? Ideally, you reflect during the lesson. That is the best time to reflect, is while you're doing the work. And for some, this may take some practice. You may not be great at it when you first start. And you have to keep in mind that when you're reflecting during your lesson, that you don't want to take away from your delivery. You don't want to take away from the content and forget. You focus so much on, okay, am I doing this right, that you forget to teach. So this may take some practice if you decide to reflect during your lesson. And it's not something that you may want to do every day. Reflection during the lesson every day may not be feasible for you. But at some point in time during the week, you should have about at least 2 times where you are trying to reflect during the lesson. And as I said, it's going to take practice, but you have to keep in mind to not take away from the instruction as well, and forgetting about that you're trying to make sure you're engaging students and that you have their attention and that they're learning that material. So reflecting during the lesson requires you making notes about the delivery and content. And you may also look at how often you are praising and encouraging your students. And one way to do this, a simple way to do this, is creating some type of checklist. A checklist can be very helpful. And so a checklist that goes over and covers those different points, the delivery of content and how often you praise and encourage students, that's a good starting point for you. Your checklist could also include the number of times that you ask high order questions to your students. And that is something that's very important. We want to make sure that we are giving a good number of high order questions to our students and getting them to think and evaluate and synthesize. We want to offer a good amount of high order questions. So that may be a part of your checklist. Another good time for you to reflect could be during your planning period, or at the end of the day before you leave the school building. These are good times to reflect. Another time that you could reflect, which doesn't require you to write, because this is on your drive home, so don't encourage you to write as you're driving, but just talking through your day, talking through your lesson. And no one has to be in the car. If your kids are in the car, they may listen, they may not. You may actually set up your phone or have a little mini recorder to record some of the thoughts that you're having. But if you have a pretty good distance in order to drive from home, from work to home, you may take that time to have some thoughts out loud and record that information. So I encourage you to do your reflections closer to the time of your delivery of your lesson, and not wait until you get home. When you get home, you're wanting to go ahead and slide into your time with your family. So you want to try to get that information when it's fresh in your mind. So the sooner you reflect, the better, and the more that you can remember. Because depending on what you teach, what grade level you teach, and what subjects, you may have a lot that you have covered in a given day. And so the sooner you reflect, the better. And just to go back and talk a little bit more about using a checklist, your checklist, you could also focus on areas that you want to improve in. So not only are you reflecting, but you are moving towards self improvement. So you could set your checklist up to go through the things that may be from your previous year at the end of the last school year. Let's say that after you've had your evaluations, there were areas in which your administrator suggested that you work on. So the next school year, you could start off with a checklist that is just dealing with those items that you needed to improve in. So your reflective checklist, it can be a great way to look back over the work that you have done and also the things that you have said in class. You may just write down little sticky notes during your lesson, just having a sticky pad next to you, or some of us, we like to have notebooks. You may write down a note and write down, okay, I know I made this comment. There's another way I could have said that better. But again, doing the reflection is very important, but again, you don't want to take away from the content and the delivery of the lesson. So it's something you have to practice. It's something you have to practice, but it is important to look back on that work. There will never be enough time in the day to do everything that you want to do if you continue to see time as limited. So we've already said, go ahead and remove the blinders off your eyes. Go ahead and put all the doubts in the back of your head and look at time as being your friend so that you can slide in that reflective piece to look back on your work. Not all reflection has to be written. So as I said, sometimes you may just want to talk out what you have done on that drive home, or as you are preparing for your next day, you may just be in your classroom talking some things out. But not all reflections have to be written, but that written feedback to yourself is very important because it's something you can look back on, and not just for the next day or the next lesson, but you may reflect back onto that lesson a year later, 2 years later. So written feedback to yourself, that reflecting piece, is so very important. Reflect for growth and reflect to move forward. This has been LaShanta, and I hope that you have enjoyed the information that you've received. And again, we are on the road to an effective classroom environment. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.